Hey guys, thanks for joining us for the sponsorship and sport discussion. I'm Jeff Mirmelstein. I work at Blinkfire. Also have with me Mike Bolden on the business development team, and Will Yoder, who will introduce himself in a second. Real quick about me and Blinkfire. Blinkfire is a platform, for those of you who don't know, that allows in real time brands, teams, leagues, agents, and individual talent, like players, to measure their media impact, specifically on social. One of the key differentiators about Blinkfire is that we use computer vision technology. So not only can you measure discussion around hashtags and app mentions, we actually can also recognize images and brand logos within images to understand the engagement and impression reach across the social platform. We're also actually in beta right now to be able to do it for video, which is really exciting, and something we look forward to launching a little bit more broadly in the near future. I'll let Will introduce himself and talk a little bit about his role at Octagon, and then get into some questions about sponsorships a little bit more broadly.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So my name is Will. I head up digital here at Octagon on the talent side of the business. We were early beta participants with Jeff at Blinkfire. And what I really focus on here is how to make our company and both our athletes better through technology. So we work with our athletes to help improve their social media presence, help find ways to make them more marketable on their platform, and also find ways to try new platforms that they might get an early adopter advantage by being early on. We also look at ways that we can help our athletes' partners improve through building them technology, and we also have our own technological products that we build in-house to try and help us be on the cutting edge of the athlete representation business. So as I always say, I hate to use the cliche, all things digital, but that really what is kind of what we focus on here at Octagon on athlete side of the business.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Will. So purpose of this discussion is to just learn a little bit more and chat about sponsorships broadly. A lot of sponsorships originate offline. A couple of examples that were in the discussion topic are Levi's Stadium naming rights and some soccer or worldwide football sponsorships on the front of their jerseys. You are in an interesting position being at Octagon, an agency sitting in the middle of brands, teams, and the talent, like you alluded to. Across all the different platforms, everything from TV to print to online to merchandise, just the whole gamut. When it comes to putting your players, your talent in the best light for sponsors and partnerships, what kind of things do you look at, and how do you, I guess, kind of pitch that to the different brands and suitors?
Sure. So we look at it from a bunch of different perspectives. One perspective is we want to actually see what kind of reach the brands we're working with has and what kind of reach they're planning on using in the campaign itself, right? So for our athletes, we want to make sure that they are represented in a good light during the campaign. So if we have an opportunity to pair one of our athletes with a brand that is viewed positively in the public, whether it's a technology brand or a fashion brand, that weighs heavily for how we want to interact with them. Also, if we know that there's going to be a really strong marketing campaign from all these different platforms that you just mentioned, whether print, media, TV, banners, that sort of thing, that's helpful for us to know also when we're trying to work with a brand partner and bring our athletes on board. Because sometimes if there's national exposure, that can be more important to our athletes than simple dollars and cents. From our perspective, we want to make sure that we can convince the brands that our athletes have great digital distribution on their own. In the past few years, we've definitely seen a shift from where brands who want to work with athletes, they're partnering with their personality and their perceived brand, and then they are in charge of the distribution of getting that relationship out to the public through traditional mainstream media. What we really want to focus on now is, look, we've helped our athletes cultivate their own distribution networks. Very often, millions and millions of followers are included in that, and we want to try and find a way to convince the brands, look, not only do we have a distribution network and a platform which you can tap into, we also have, proof that there are, great engagement rates here, which very often has become more important to the brands we're talking to than simply the reach. If they wanted to just reach as many people as possible, they could easily do that through traditional Facebook or Twitter advertising. Those are relatively cost-effective ways to advertise. But from our perspective, we want to let them know, look, not only are you getting the reach that you would from those platforms, but also you're getting engagement levels that we can now quantify in different ways through tools like Blinkfire to show the brands that they are getting way more out of this than they were previously.
Cool. So, like you were talking about reach. When I hear reach, I also think inventory. You mentioned Blinkfire, which is fantastic. What are some of the other ways that you quantify reach beyond just my athlete has this many followers and on Facebook has this many likes? And are brands receptive to that, or are they still a little bit more traditional in the way that they think about things? Like, we want to know a little bit more how many TV impressions we're getting, how many articles, be it print or online, are people writing? So I guess it's the two-part question. One, what do you mean when you say reach, and how are different ways that you measure it from the agency side? And then two is, how receptive are brands to, I guess, accepting these reach metrics that are a little bit newer, like followers and engagements on social?
Sure. I'll take the second side first. So, in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of progress toward, a better understanding of how to leverage these digital packages that our athletes provide. And, when we talk about inventory for our athletes, we're really talking about, their social currency and how they interact with their followers and how much we can actually interweave brands into that story arc. So on that side of things, we've had those conversations, and we're getting more toward the side where instead of simply throwing in social media as part of the overall sponsorship, we want to be going to brands, and it's my drive to go to the brand to say, look, instead of simply throwing in some simple tweets, let's include your brand into the story arcs that we're creating for our athletes on their social media and prove that there's higher level engagement rates through that. I think everybody wins there, because I don't think our athletes win if we simply throw in sponsored materials. I don't think that the brands win if it's not really thought out, but I think if we can put them into an overall story arc that kind of helps our athletes get the message they're trying to get across through the brands, I think everybody wins there. So those are conversations that we've been having and that are ongoing. It's been more receptive lately than it was previously, and I think we're getting there as people are kind of understanding that the future of how people interact with brands is online. And going off of that, what's really interesting is, in terms of how the brands measure their reach, in terms of how they relate to our athletes in traditional media, a lot of that has been to them on their end, but it's difficult for them to do so, right? How are they going to measure it? They're going to measure it on ratings through different advertising platforms they've used, through click-through rates, through general business goals. But what's interesting with digital is there are new ways to measure that, right? Through Facebook and Twitter's own analytics platforms, you can see how many people you've reached on each post, what the engagement rates are in those posts. You can actually show, hey, not only do we have a number of 4,000 people replied to this post, here's what they said, here are the images they shared. And what's really interesting, I think the next phase, is how can we kind of bring those two together, right? Because when people interact with traditional media and the reach that's happening there are some ways to measure it, but they're kind of archaic. When they interact with digital media, there are definitely ways to measure it, but a lot of them are electronic. And when you talk about an overall partnership, there's more than that that's involved. So for instance, Stephen Curry is a client of ours. He has a deal with Under Armour, and they did a lot of different stuff in New York City recently around the All-Star game. He was the #1 vote getter for NBA All-Star. And there's stuff there that doesn't always get picked up, which you guys are working to fix, other people are working to fix. So for instance, if Under Armour has an on-site activation around Stephen Curry, so for one thing, they did a Chef Curry food truck they had going around the city, and a fan takes a photo of that and shares it. Traditionally, there wasn't really a way to measure that, but that is really impactful for the brand to know that that's happening. So we really see the convergence of all those kind of coming together now, and I think there's a lot of value there moving forward.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful. And actually, I took a couple of screenshots. If we can put the screenshot up, it's not directly related to Steph Curry, but the San Francisco Giants obviously won the World Series last year. And whenever a team wins the World Series, they do what's called a trophy tour. So the trophy tour this year was sponsored by Bank of America, and in an otherwise relatively quiet time when it comes to sponsorships with baseball because it's the off season. This chart that hopefully everybody can see is engagements based on photos that the San Francisco Giants and fans actually tweeted out, posted on Facebook, posted on Instagram. Each of these lines in this case represents 10,000 engagements, so not impressions, but engagements. So you can see over the course of the month they got probably about 40,000 engagements on social media. And what that actually is, if you go to the next slide, this line is a sum of, and this is Blinkfire's technology, in all of these images across social media, Blinkfire can actually recognize when, in this case, the Bank of America logo is being broadcast across, again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+, and we actually also in China track Tencent. So this is something that the Giants, if it weren't for the technology that we provide, all of these Bank of America impressions and engagements, people know they're floating around on social media out there, but this is an ability and a way to really quantify and go to Bank of America and say, hey guys, thanks again for being a sponsor of the Trophy Tour. By the way, we got this many engagements. If you make an assumption about engagement rate, that's actually this many impressions. So it's a great way for teams and brands to work together to really quantify the reach of sponsorships that, again, this is an offline sponsorship. It's not an online specific campaign, but the offline Bank of America sponsorship manifests itself online, and the ability to measure and quantify that leads to very interesting ROI stories. So that was one example. Another example, if you go to the next slide, is Real Madrid. I just took two of Real Madrid's sponsors. One is Adidas, one is Fly Emirates, the airline, which is their title sponsor on their jersey. In this case, each of the horizontal lines represent 1 million engagements. So you can see the scale when a social team, a digital team, and a sponsorship team are all working together, just the kind of scale that you can get from an impressions perspective. And these are in the neighborhood of 15 to 30 million impressions across a month. Engagements across a month. And even if you assume a super high 10% engagement rate, that's hundreds of millions of impressions a month, and that starts to get to be real and material impression levels when it comes to thinking about the sponsorship team. Hey, how much should we charge for these sponsorships, because we can now measure this reach on social media from a visualization perspective. And if you go to the next slide, I took a screenshot also of just some of the examples. They might show up a little bit small on your screen, but think about the size of a Facebook photo or an Instagram photo. The green box that highlights the different sponsorships in each of the different cards that we show is a real and meaningful brand impression. And then we can count the engagements and make assumptions for impressions against those, which is really exciting and something that we think is very valuable for the teams, because they can potentially think about ways to price that into their sponsorships, and then also the brands, because it gives them a more full and holistic view of the reach and the ROI of their different sponsorship investments. So we can take that down now, but thanks for putting those slides up. And want to talk with Will a little bit also. I know that you've told me that you use one of our most valuable followers tools also, and just wanted to hear a little bit more about, like, maybe for Steph or some of your other guys, ways that you're thinking about using the most valuable followers tool as an engagement platform, so that you can come up with creative executions.
Sure, absolutely. So as Jeff mentioned, the Blinkfire tool has a most valuable follower platform that kind of lists out not only who are the most followed fans of a certain athlete, but also who are the most valuable in terms of their engagement. And it's really kind of a cool tool that we're looking forward to playing with. We haven't played with it yet, but to really understand, if, I think Stephen Curry's most valuable followers, one of them was Snoop Dogg and Nickelodeon and Ben Stiller. How can we interact with those followers to try and, leverage better storylines on our athletes' social accounts? Because, what we're really trying to do for our athletes is have them tell their stories in a way that fans understand and they can digest. And if there are ways to cross over with other people that a lot of people care about that have millions of followers, we think that's a really cool and fun way to do it.
Cool. Looks like there's a question. Lots of sponsorships start offline, a shirt, a stadium, etc. How do you then activate it online? So this is a little bit of a different avenue than what we're talking about now. There are definitely agencies and marketing firms that can help teams and brands activate sponsorships online. What we're doing and what we're talking about is how the offline sponsorships actually manifest themselves online. So when we were looking at the Giants and Real Madrid, none of those engagements and therefore impressions were driven by a specific online campaign. Instead, we were taking those offline sponsorships and just understanding how those offline sponsorships find themselves online, whether it's in hashtags or @ mentions, or in the case of some of the things we showed, actual photo images.
And what you guys are doing there, just to comment on that real quick, it kind of bridges the gap that I was talking about before, right? Where, if they're doing an offline activation and they have online accounts that are also participating with it, finding the midpoint there where people are choosing to activate on their own around that sponsorship, that's one of the main reasons these brands are doing this, and to be able to quantify that and show that is really, really powerful.
Will, are there any athletes who you think do an especially good job, whether they're Octagon athletes or non-Octagon athletes or teams, just that you think would be a good example for people to look to if they want to understand a little bit better? Hey, we have this talent. What are some of the things they could do from an online perspective to really enhance their persona and enhance their personal brand?
Sure. I mentioned Stephen Curry earlier, obviously. I think a couple of athletes in our Olympics and action division sport do a really good job, and for them it's really important, right? Because they're only on TV so often. They only have mainstream media attention so often. So Michael Phelps is one who does an awesome job. I think he has somewhere around 8 million plus aggregate followers. And he does a great job of keeping, in the spotlight with what he's doing with training and with his foundation and with his partners. And I know he's doing some new business initiatives in terms of a line that he's working on. And it's very cool to see how he represents himself, but also engages the community as well. Another is Alana Blanchard. She does a great job. I think she has roughly 2 million plus aggregate followers. And she's selling her lifestyle, right? She's a surfer. She lives in Hawaii. She's on the beach all the time, and she really does a great job of selling that brand online. And brands want to invest in that also because it's a great story that people want to take part of. Especially, I know in the winter here in DC, it's been quite cold to see Alana on the beach. It definitely is fun going through my Instagram feed seeing that. Another athlete who I think does a great job is not an Octagon athlete. I had a chance to meet him briefly when I was up in New York for the Facebook Sports Summit. Harrison Barnes. He really kind of gets it and takes it to heart. He actually interned with Facebook, I think it was last summer, and helped them work on their product. But he gets that this is an engagement platform and that he can work with fans and answer questions for them and really find new engaging ways to interact with them. I think he set up a P.O. box it was last summer where fans could send in articles or different pieces of material to get autographed, and he would send it back out. And what was really cool for him, he was saying, was that the kind of stuff he received and the letters of why it was important was so moving for him that it made the experience altogether much more worth it than he expected.
Very cool. I think I have time for one more question. What's up next for Octagon and the digital strategy? Like, what do you think digital for Octagon will be a year out or a couple of years out? What are the kind of things that you're thinking about and excited for?
Sure. So I talked a lot about it earlier in this chat about storylines and developing content that matters to fans. I think what's really interesting moving forward is, there's obviously a huge shift to mobile, and I think for the last few years, people have been trying to figure out what that is. Is it an athlete coming out with their own app? Is it an athlete interacting with different apps that are out there? And I think, especially after Apple's recent quarter where they sold, I think, 76 million iPhones, and looking at the data for what people do on those iPhones, I think the answer is engaging in the social networks that people are using on their phones. The data is insane how much time people are spending on their phones as opposed to watching TV or any other sort of engagement platform. And the majority of that time is spent on different social networks. So for us, we're going to be really trying to pay attention to, is it Facebook, is it Twitter, is it Instagram, is it a newer startup like Snapchat or something like that where fans are engaging on? And also, at some point, how do brands get involved there in a way that doesn't disrupt the mobile experience? Because the mobile experience is different than the desktop experience. So is that a video platform like Facebook or YouTube? Is it micro content like on Twitter? Or is it something all new altogether that we haven't even seen yet? So really interesting to see how things will change moving forward into mobile.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks a lot. I think we are about out of time, so I'm going to wrap it up. If anybody has any other questions for either me, Blinkfire, Will, Octagon, feel free to tweet or any other social media questions using the hashtag #SportsConf hashtag. Thanks a lot, and have fun the rest of the day.